Hi everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. In this video, it seems like the situation with Israel has taken another step in the wrong direction. When I say wrong, I mean toward war, toward instability, um, but I guess a right step in the prophetic direction as far as Armageddon and the final war beginning. So what you're looking at here, I'll just read the the title of this article. Defense Minister Gallant calls to stop judicial reform legislation. Okay, so what does this have to do anything? I don't know if you've been watching my other videos about what's going on in Israel right now, but essentially Netanyahu was out of power for a little while. The government that was formed to get him out of power failed, and he got back in. And one thing that he's doing right now, I don't know why. I haven't gotten that far with it, but him and his government, those that support him, they want to reform the judicial branch of their government, the high court. So imagine that the president of the United States was going to make changes to the Supreme Court, which he can't really do because we have a constitution, and things are already defined what certain branches of government can do and what they can't do. There's supposed to be a system of checks and balances. Well, Israel doesn't have a constitution. They have, um, I think it's their Declaration of Independence, which kind of uh, is like the bedrock of their legal system, but they don't have a constitution like we do here in the United States. So, what a lot of people think he's doing is that he's trying to weaken the high court and essentially consolidate power. So there's a lot of people that are worried about that, primarily secular and leftist type people in the country, Israeli Arabs, Palestinians, because his government is mostly kind of like it's being described as a far right government. Okay, I'm just saying what it says in the papers. That's it. I'm not trying to make any sort of political statement. So, what they fear is that by consolidating power, they're going to be able to do more things that, uh, the Orthodox and ultra Orthodox want to do with Israel, like expanding settlements throughout the West Bank. And I don't think that they have any in Gaza. It's like a West Bank type thing. But anyway, now there's been a lot of things to kind of be concerned with this. Um, because there's been talk by the president of Israel. Uh, the president is more of a ceremonial role. Um, doesn't, from what I can tell, he doesn't really do anything. The one that's really in charge, the one that really has the power, is the prime minister, Netanyahu. But the president, was calling for some kind of compromise or talk more about it. Uh, he made some proposals, and it was flatly rejected by Netanyahu and his government. And then in a response, he was like, "Well, we're getting pretty close to civil war. For our entire history, 75 years. Uh, this is I'm paraphrasing, but it's kind of a quote. He said that the abyss has never been closer, talking about civil war. So we've discussed how obviously that could be a catalyst for the final war, because if Israel's weak, if Israel's fighting itself, then if you're an enemy of Israel, that's a great time to attack. That's a perfect time. That's when you would want to attack, is when they're distracted and they're using resources fighting each other. So there's a couple things I want to go over in this video. We have the defense minister, which is essentially their secretary of defense, who's concerned about the situation in the way that what this legislation that they're trying to push through, how it's impacting the military and weakening it, which that's obviously bad. And then I have an article here that we're going to go over where it says Islamic Jihad website. According to this website, the IDF, which is the Israeli military, disintegrating before our eyes. So this radical website, that's how they're viewing the situation. The Israeli military is disintegrating before our eyes. So before we go much further, uh, here's an update on the Book of Mormon sharing challenge. We have one more person that's reported contact with the missionaries. So we've gone from 24 yesterday. Now we have 25 total since the beginning of this challenge. This was reported by Daniel Hershey. Okay, he's shared 9 copies of the Book of Mormon, and one of those people have decided to meet with the missionaries. You guys, this isn't supposed to be like a numbers thing, but you know, you do have to like look at it this way. When I was on my mission president had goals for us to reach every week, and then we were supposed to report our numbers. So it's not supposed to be like a dead robotic thing. But what I'm trying to say is, the more you share, obviously, the greater the chances that you'll reach somebody that is prepared to receive the gospel into their life. So far, we've shared 4,893 copies of the Book of Mormon. So we're getting just ever closer to 5,000, which will be a huge milestone. But the number of people sharing is only at 445. And what I'm puzzled by is, it's kind of like at a more or less a steady rate. I don't know how this happens. Maybe if there's like a mathematician out there, maybe you can explain why it's like this. It's the same with my YouTube channel. Like, for some reason, there's like a kind of like more or less a steady rate at which people join my channel. I don't know why there's not just like a huge bump all of a sudden, you know? So like, I just want to try. If you're listening, and this video probably will have thousands of viewers, at least like 2,000 at the least. Can you just do it? Can you just share the Book of Mormon and then let me know? And then in like a day, we'll go from 445 to 2,445. And then this will go up by at least 2,000, and we'll easily get to 6,893. Can we do that? If you're listening, use your Gospel Library app. Just send one. Just send one copy of the Book of Mormon to anybody. Pray about it. If you can't really think of anybody, just pick somebody that you know is not a member of the church and send it. If you can, personalize it. If not, send it anyway, because something is better than nothing. So anyway, can we do this little experiment and see if like all of a sudden we can jump from 445 to 2,445? Please make that happen. Okay, so let's get to this. Okay, so we're going to start with this, and then we're going to go to this website, and then we're going to look at the opposition in Israel and a few other things. Okay, Defense Minister Gallant calls to stop judicial reform legislation. Gallant also called on the opposition to the legislation, to stop Israeli Defense Force reservist strikes and protests against the government during any new negotiations. Now, this is kind of like a big deal. You have the reserves, which according to Amir Tsarfati, or whatever his name is, Tsarfati, this is an Israeli, like, Jewish Christian. And in this video, his most recent one, he was talking about how the reserves are really a really big part of of Israel's military. Like, they really depend on the reserves. I'm not too familiar with it, but it seems like it's different than it is here in the United States. And of course, because you have a small country, and typically with like smaller countries, because they don't have as many people, there's like a required term of service that you have to serve in the military, and then you can't really afford, and you don't have enough people to have like a big full-time active military like we do here in the United States. So, in other words, the reservists who are protesting and saying that they're not going to show up for duty, that's kind of a big problem. That's kind of a big problem, because it's almost like they're the backbone of Israel's defense. So, okay, so let's read a little bit of this. Defense Minister Yoav Gallant on Saturday night made a dramatic declaration calling on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to halt the judicial overhaul long enough for more deeply engage in negotiations with others to reach a compromise. And by the way, I looked it up. I just wanted to make sure. Yes, the Minister of Defense is the equivalent of the Secretary of Defense here in the United States. So here's a Wikipedia article that confirms that. And look at that. Look at this building. This is the Ministry of Defense headquarters. And yeah, whenever you see a building like that, you may want to stop and think about that and what's going on there. That's not just any building. Okay, so Gallant said, quote, "The breach within the nation has penetrated deep into the IDF and the defense establishment. This is a clear and major threat to the security of Israel. I will ... I will not allow this," end quote. So he's calling this a major threat to the security of Israel. And yeah, it makes sense. If you have the main fighting force, the reservists, who aren't showing up and they're protesting, look what happens on the enemy's website. The IDF disintegrating before our eyes. The website and its followers have received a huge boost from Israeli soldiers refusing to serve out of disagreement with legal reform. So this is like motivating them. They're like salivating because of this. Okay. He also called on the opposition to stop the IDF reservist strikes and protests against the government during any new negotiations. So please stop. Please, we're gonna talk about this, but we cannot have you protesting and not showing up for work. Okay, we have to have a military, or else we're gonna be dead and gone. The defense minister said, quote, "I have risked and will risk my life for Israel, but the dangers around us are large. Iran is close to nuclear military capability. Iran is close to nuclear military capability than ever. The Palestinian arena is also burning." Yes. Oh gosh. There's so many problems right now for Israel. You have Iran, like you just said. There's been stuff going on with Iran. I'm not going to cover all of that, but essentially it's like they're almost like getting more and more support, getting more daring, and they're getting closer to this nuclear capability to attack Israel with a nuclear bomb. And then on top of that, we've talked about the stacking of holy days this year. This is a year in which Passover and Ramadan overlap. Ramadan started just 2 days ago on the 23rd, which was Thursday, and then it's going to go until, excuse me, until the 20th of April. The last 10 days of Ramadan, I guess, are the holiest, and the Temple Mount's going to be completely shut down to non-Muslims during that 10-day period. And whenever you have an overlap like this of the two holidays or observance times, there's usually an uptick in violence. But this year in particular, Hamas, which is in the Gaza Strip, let me pull up the calendar, the map, just in case you're not familiar. I don't know how familiar everybody is with Israel, but you have the West Bank. This is pretty much under the control of the Palestinian Authority. And then the Gaza Strip, for some time now, has been under control of Hamas, which is viewed as a terrorist organization. So they are wanting to have a third intifada. Okay, the last one started in the year 2000 after Ariel Sharon went up to the Temple Mount You know, everything with that went okay, but afterwards it caused an intifada, which is a uprising. Okay, they're wanting to do a new one because you have a new generation. Things are just getting worse in the eyes of Palestinians and Muslims. So they're wanting to do that, and it's like a perfect storm is kind of brewing right now, especially with the judicial reform and how these reservists and others are. It's like I don't think I'm not so sure that it's ever been so divided before in the history of Israel. Okay, so let's get back to this. The IDF is a great army, along with the partner security forces, but that due to fights of judicial overhaul in recent weeks, something fell apart. He said. Gallant explained, "Quote: I hear the voices from the military field, and I am worried. What is happening to Israeli society does not pass over IDF. I see the strength of our forces being weakened. And that's not something that you want to happen when you're the Secretary of Defense, the Minister of Defense, a general, Prime Minister, President, somebody that's over the military. You do not want that to happen, especially if you're Israel." All right, he said he is committed to the Likud's values, but Israel is above everything. Likud is the party that Netanyahu is a part of. And I think it said in an article that I was reading about him that he had actually switched to Likud. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to look it up. Okay, he continues. Victory by one of the sides in the Knesset committee rooms or in the city streets would be a loss for the state of Israel. He further added, "We need a change in the judiciary. The balance between the branches needs a new balance, which will strengthen public faith, but massive changes must be done with dialogue." End quote. And it makes me wonder, like, I'm not an expert in foreign affairs and politics, geopolitics, but I wonder if at all there's the possibility of the military stepping in if they really truly feel that the security of Israel is at stake. I wonder if they would do a military coup and take Benjamin Netanyahu out. Who knows? That could happen. And if that happened, as far as I know, that would be a first in Israeli history. Um, so it's weird. It's crazy. This past Thursday, Gallant had been expected to make a declaration against the judicial reform, but canceled the speech after a meeting with Netanyahu. However, it appears that Gallant saw that Netanyahu's speech did not calm the country's temperament and fix the growing trend of IDF reservists threatening to strike and not to show up for their training. Yeah, I actually watched that, and you can too. Let's see, Netanyahu speech. There was a recent speech. This one right here. Netanyahu makes dramatic statement amid judicial overhaul protests, and I listened to it. Excuse me. I listened to it, and there is one thing. I'm not really wanting to discuss politics really, but there is one thing I agreed with that he said. I guess the way that Israel works right now is that future. I don't know what they call their thing. Future Supreme Court justices or High Court justices, whatever, judges. The nominations are provided by the judicial branch itself, which is drastically different from how we do it in the United States, and I imagine other Western countries. In the United States, you have the president. He nominates potential Supreme Court justices, and then it's the United States Senate that confirms, right? So you have the two other branches of government that work together to put somebody in the Supreme Court. But in Israel, it's not like that. You just have the Supreme Court or the High Court itself. The way that Netanyahu described it, it's like they have like their own little club, and they just kind of nominate each other, essentially. So, I could get on board with that. I think that's right, but it seems like there's a whole lot more that they're trying to do, and I'll admit I'm not thoroughly versed in it. But if you're interested, you might want to watch this video. I'll put it in the description below. So, anyway, it's saying here that that speech, it didn't change anything. People are still upset. Okay, so, Ben Gvir, that's the Dwight Schrute of Israel that we've talked about before. He is a fiery little guy, and he says so Ben Gvir calls for Netanyahu to fire Gallant. National Security Minister Itamar Ben Gvir did not welcome Gallant's statement, however. Quote, I call on the Prime Minister to fire Gallant, who entered the Defense Ministry with the rights votes, but gave in to the pressures of refusing orders and is trying to put an end to an important reform, he said. Communications Minister Shlomo Karhi was on Ben Gvir's side, apologizing to right-wing voters, quote, for our defense minister giving in to pressure from the left. He added that, quote, we won't cancel the people's vote to satisfy the elite in the media. Now that shouldn't really be too much of a surprise coming from Ben Gvir. Again, he is kind of he's just a little bit on the extreme side from what I've seen. Okay, so you have the defense minister that, I don't know, maybe he's giving in, maybe he's not. I don't know. I don't care. But he's saying this, right? And he's concerned about Israel's security. And we should be concerned about it too, because if this if this opens up the way for the final war, then that affects the entire world. So, okay, 7 Israel National News. Islamic Jihad website, IDF disintegration before our eyes. Okay, let's see what's going on here. The Islamic Jihad's Palestine Al-Yum website published an article regarding the quote-unquote disintegration taking place within the ranks of the IDF due to the recent wave of reserve duty soldiers refusing to serve. Hundreds of reserve pilots refusing to attend training exercises last week has been at the front of the ordeal. Israel's crisis has been perpetuated by an increase in external threats in the activity of the quote-unquote Palestinian resistance, according to the article. Journalist and Israeli affairs expert Hassan Lafi, whose articles are also published on Hezbollah's website, told the site that Israel is not only in a state of national security crisis, but also an existential one. According to him, the country's military preparedness will be strongly weakened by the time the next regional conflict breaks out, or in case of another confrontation with Palestinian Arab terrorists. Lafty further said that the events in Israel reveal the quote-unquote disintegration of the Israeli army, since the IDF is reliant on its reserves, which account for two-thirds of the entire fighting force. I don't know how that compares to the United States. What percent of the American military is reserves? The U.S. military, this is according to NATO.int, the U.S. military reserves date back to the beginning of our nation, when militias fought in our War of Independence prior to the creation of a regular army. Today, our reserve components have about 1.1 million members and comprise over 45% of the total U.S. military force. So the United States is at 45%, whereas Israel is more like 66%. Which that's a pretty drastic difference. Lafi emphasizes that the most important unit is the Air Force, and that reserve pilots refusing to take part in military exercises will cause significant damage to the Army. According to Lafi, soldiers' unwillingness to perform their basic duties as a sign of protest has permeated special units such as the IDF's cyber unit. as well as military medics, and will soon cause the IDF to lose its capacity to attack enemy forces. I mean, is that really true? Of like, for protesting for a few weeks? Like, I feel like I need more context, like, because stepping away from duty for a week or two, I don't know. Again, I'm not a military expert either. I was in the military. I know that military readiness was like a big deal. That's like one of the primary concerns for every company commander. You look at things like, um, is your unit fit? You know, are they passing the Army? I can't remember what it's called now because they changed it, but during my time, it was the Army Physical Fitness Test, um, the APFT. Also, qualification on weapons. Um, they had a thing called MedPros, which is where they look at your health, and if you were to deploy today, would you be deployable? Some people have like different things going on, like injuries, or they have to like go get their dental work updated before they can deploy. So they look at that in terms of readiness. So what I'm saying is, with just like a few weeks, I don't know how long this has been going on for, but at what point is this true? Um, that soon it will cause the IDF to lose its capacity to attack enemy forces. How long has to pass before that becomes true? I don't know. The author claimed that if the situation continues, the IDF will not be able to sufficiently address all the threats at its borders. So I don't know about you, but if I was Iran, I'd be like, "Oh yeah, this is what we're looking for." And then at the same time, you have this going on right now as we speak. 28 arrested on Ayalon Highway during judicial reform protests. In Tel Aviv, more than 200,000 protesters gathered at Kaplan in Tel Aviv. They lit torches in memory of women who have been murdered. Okay, and okay, so that so if you're on Netanyahu's side, this is who you're going to be going up against in civil war. And I must say, I would not be afraid of that. Oh my gosh, the enemy's wearing sparkly sparkles on their face. And are they on rollerblades? No, they might as well. They might as well be on rollerblades and unicycles. But of course, they got the flags. You got to have the flags and orange smoke for some reason, and megaphone in hand. Oh gosh, Israelis protested the judicial reform across Israel on Saturday for the 12th week in a row, continuing a cycle of protests that have been sorry have been have been conducted weekly since the beginning of January. In, in Tel Aviv, more than 200,000 protesters gathered at Kaplan in Tel Aviv. They lit torches in memory of women who have been murdered by their partners and took part in a march. I assume that has to do something with like the way that the law works right now in Israel. I don't know. Protesters blocked the Ayalon highway in Tel Aviv, and 28 were arrested. In Israel, police statement said. Police also used water cannon on those blocking the highway. Former member of the Knesset, Tzipi Livni, and spy Eli Cohen's daughter, Sophie Ben-Dor, made speeches in Tel Aviv calling for the government to listen. I mean, this looks really dramatic. Okay, I can see why you'd want to use the orange smoke. This looks like craziness. This looks like this looks like a revolutionary picture right here. I'll probably use this for my thumbnail. I'm not going to read much more. Just basically, there's a lot of protesting by by fellas like this, with like drums and popping smoke. And you can see this. This is on the other websites too, because we've been looking at Jerusalem Post, 7 Israel National News, Jerusalem Post again. Now we have Times of Israel. Gallant calls to pause judicial overhaul, citing tangible danger to state security. Live updates. It's talking about those 25 arrests on the highway. Netanyahu meets UK Home Secretary Suella Braverman to discuss Iran. Other matters. I'm going to have to look into Iran. I feel like forever they've been saying that Iran is close to developing a nuclear bomb, but I don't understand why they haven't done it by now if they've been if they've been close in the past. Hundreds of thousands join nationwide protests with key overhaul law about to pass. Well, about to pass, I thought that they were going to hold off until after Passover. That's the last that I heard. Unless that's what they're talking about to pass. You got Haaretz talking about it too. So, anyway, and then here in the U.S., we got this. Trump warns, let's see, this was from yesterday. Trump warns there'll be, quote, death and destruction if prosecutors charge me. I think he's referring to the fact that he called on people to mobilize and protest and stuff if he got arrested. I don't know how seriously to take that. I don't know if that would that happen. I don't know. Do you think that would happen if Trump got arrested? Do you think that there would be protests? I don't know. That's this is all part of the suspense that I've been talking about in the live streams. I did a couple live streams talking about how it feels like there's a lot of suspense right now. The first time I tried to talk about suspense, it devolved into a conversation about multi-level marketing and pyramid schemes, but I was still able to kind of communicate my thoughts. But you have all this stuff. I don't know if this is just, in other words, I don't know how seriously to take this. All I can go off of is what these companies are saying, these media companies are saying. I don't really have reason to doubt. I'm not aware of another situation like this happening before in Israel. So I guess I am taking it pretty seriously, especially given the fact that we've been tracking all these things that have to do with the second coming, all the changes happening in the church, all the signs in the heavens, all the signs in the earth. It's really bizarro world right now, frankly. All I can say for sure is what we've read. And it would seem that there's some enemies of Israel that are really happy with what's happening right now, which I feel like that would just increase the odds that they'll try and do something. And it'll probably be, it'll probably be over the next few weeks. It may go along with the Passover holiday that starts at sundown on the 5th and then goes until the 13th of April. So that's the week following, the week following General Conference. So just 1, 2, 3 days after General Conference, that's when Passover is going to start. The next week after conference, that's when we're going to be celebrating Easter, and it's going to be the 1-hour church. And I don't know. And I guess a real prime time for violence happening is the last week of, or the last 10 days of Ramadan, which would go from, I guess, 2 days after Easter until from the 11th to the 20th of April. But I don't know, maybe things will flare up before then. Maybe something new there'll be some kind of new development and things will go off the rails before Passover. I don't know. So you'll have to let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think that this is all just going to eventually kind of work itself out? It's not going to end up being so dramatic. Do you think that this will or could turn into the final war? Israel being weak, Israel's enemies taking advantage of that, attacking, invading, bombing, nuclear bombing. Let me know what you think. Of course, no one can predict the future. I'm not asking you to predict the future. Just what's your gut telling you? Do you think that this is just a big nothing burger? And if so, why? Um, and again, I would remind you, I'm not aware of another time in Israeli history that this has happened. I feel like that's significant. It doesn't mean for sure that something will happen just because it's the first time, but I don't think that we've really seen this happen before. The president of Israel, if you'll remember that one video that I did where he was talking about civil war, he pointed to the fact that that this is the 75th year. This will be the 75th year of Israel being a nation. And there's been like a lot of stuff that has to do with that. In fact, let's see. Okay, here it is. So this was published May of last year when Naftali Bennett was the prime minister. Bennett on Independence Day. When Israel is united, we are unbeatable. And yeah, I would argue that that's generally true. More so when Israel is righteous, but part of being righteous is being united and getting rid of contention, division, being one in heart, one in mind, right? So that's partly true. So look at what he says here. This is last year. Quote, 74 years of statehood has taught us that when the people of Israel are united, no one can beat us, said Prime Minister Naftali Bennett on the state ceremony marking the 74th Independence Day. Okay, so we're coming up on the 75th really soon. And look what he said this time. He says, okay, Bennett reiterated the message he stated on Remembrance Day, stressing that sectarianism destroyed the Jewish state in the Second Temple period, and that, quote, a sovereign and united Jewish state has never survived here more than 80 years. So that's kind of an interesting thing. And what he's referring to there, he's not... I looked this up. It's been a while since I've looked into this quote, but I think what he was referring to here is when the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom were together and united. So in other words, the years of Saul, David, and Solomon. It was like something like that. But whatever the case, he made this statement. And well, we're getting kind of close to that time. You know, this year will be the 75th year. Is that significant? I don't know. I guess we'll see. And then he continues, here we are in the 8th decade of the state of Israel. Oh, that's another way to think about it, the 8th decade. So they've had 7 successful decades. Successful meaning not being destroyed. And now they're in the 8th. In the 8th, you know, like we've talked many times before about 7 and 8. 7 is the completion of a cycle. 8 is the beginning of a new cycle. So maybe it would be appropriate for the second coming to happen before the 80 years is up. So that would be in 2028, sometime between now and 2028. All right, so he continues, the decade we have never succeeded in getting through. What? We are here in the 8th decade of the state of Israel. The decade we have never succeeded in getting through. This time we have another chance, a third chance for the Jewish people. This time we must simply succeed. Oh, okay. So in the past, it's the 80th decade or the 8th decade that they have never succeeded in getting through. So this time, let's make it different. Okay. We must not allow hatred to capture us or to control us. We need to see each other with a good eye, to believe that the other also wants the good for the state, even if his opinion is completely different. We should all always place the good of the state above our sector, above our self-interest. So I guess we'll end things on that. Coming up on 75 years, there's talk of civil war. The defense minister is concerned about force readiness. And I mean, I don't know. Again, this is just highly speculative, but could this lead to a coup if he's like serious enough about that? If Netanyahu doesn't slow things down and try and have more communication, are the enemies of Israel, are they going to go ahead and take advantage of this? Yeah, I think they are. I think we're just about there within the next few weeks. I think this is a pretty serious situation, frankly. So, all right. So let's pray and let's watch and we'll see what happens. All right, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.